Gary, is Margie going to be on? Rich, I see that David did get on, so we're okay.
Okay, good.
Hello, Eve. Are you there?
Yes, Margie. Hi, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. Still in Florida, but hope to get home soon.
Good grief.
Well, another day of emergency from yesterday. Evidently, these bugs are not easy to get rid of.
Oh my goodness.
So, we probably have about a minute. I thought I would wait until a couple of minutes afterwards.
Okay.
I am having Rich record this because our attorney has a conflict today.
Okay.
He emailed me and said that she would do whatever we needed to do, but that she was going to be unable to be on the phone call. So
Sure, I get it.
Yeah.
Okay. You know, I noted that that it was listed that Western would lead the meeting. I mean, really, it was the purpose was just to give everybody an opportunity to think about the proposed reg, and I've already shared with everybody the issues that WKU had, and we did submit our letter to EPSB and Dr. Lewis, so it really is more of an opportunity, I think, for all the other IAGs to discuss this and to, you know, make a decision as to whether or not they're going to support the reg as stated, or if, you know, they're going to make other recommendations. But we've already handled ours, and so it was just an outgrowth of the meeting that WKU hosted a few weeks back, that we just wanted some extra time to do that. But I don't have anything beyond what I've already shared that I feel like I need to do. I'm here and I'm happy to answer questions or support, but that's kind of where I'm at.
Okay. It's 1:01, so I'm going to go ahead and officially call our meeting to order. The purpose of the meeting was a request by Western, since they were unable to participate in the October meeting, about the discussion of the regulation. On the regulation, everyone has been sent a copy of the draft regulation. It has been reviewed, as I indicated in the email that went out. We have sent it to superintendents. We have sent it to directors of instruction, the instructional supervisors. We have sent it to the directors of pupil personnel. We have sent it to the directors of special ed. We have sent survey to new principals asking them about the recommendations and what their ideas would be on that. And of course, the UPPI stakeholders had an opportunity to review it the Friday before the board considered it on Monday in October. The board did receive the draft regulation in October. They also at the same time received the statement from the UPPI group that it was a paragraph statement that had been written that stated that while they appreciated the opportunity for flexibility in the principal program at this time, at the time they were discussing it in October, the feeling was that they wanted to recommend to the board that they consider it at another time as opposed to at this point. I think the reasoning behind the way the draft reads is the prerequisites for admission to a principal program, or actually to any of the advanced educator programs, is a rank 2 degree, as well as the Kentucky Teaching Certificate, and completion of 3 years of full-time documented teaching experience, or whatever meets the criteria for that. The question that came about was, since the board had waived for teachers the requirement to have a master's degree, the question came up, did we want to keep the rank 2 in the regulation? The group discussed that back in October and then realized that in the draft regulation there is a provision in Section 9 for principals that the criteria, if the candidates have met all of the other admission criteria with the exception of the rank 2, that the individual preparation program could admit the candidate into the program based on their review of the qualifications of the candidate. So that is the way the regulation reads at this point. And I'd like to hear, I'm just going to open it up for discussion because that was the question that Western presented. Western did have a conversation, we understand, with some persons in the principal programs, as well as had written a letter to them. Margie, I guess you kind of presented that that Western has already documented what they would like to see and desire. And so I guess the purpose of this meeting is for others to just talk about how they feel about the regulation, issues with it. I think the major concern centers around the rank 2 requirement, as I understand it. Is that correct, Margie?
It is, and I think there was a question that was posed during the conference call that we had a few weeks back about whether or not district input had been solicited on the rank 2 piece as well. And so that was another reason, I think, why this call was so important, was to hear if we have any feedback from districts about the rank 2 component. Okay,
and back a year ago, directors of special education, directors of pupil personnel, instructional supervisors, and superintendents were brought in from districts in focus groups, and the regulations as they were currently proposed then, and the recommendations coming, were shared with them at that time. Have we directly gone to districts other than the second survey we sent out to all superintendents, instructional supervisors, everyone asking for input? And one of the feedback questions was to take each section and ask for their input on it. But other than that, we have not had, I guess, what you might call a focus group for districts. But let's open it up now. We do have some district folks on the webinar today, so I would just open it up for anyone to comment.
Very good.
I don't have a comment about that, but may I ask a related question?
Yes, go ahead.
This is Teresa Wallace down at University of the Cumberlands.
Teresa.
I had not thought about this until I had a student contact me yesterday about the CA40 form to get the DPP certification. You know, the section in the regulation where it says they can, while they're taking the DPP courses. So I don't see that in here. Was that intentional or optional?
I'm not exactly sure, Teresa, what you're referencing, as I don't have a copy of that form in front of me. Can you explain a little bit more? That is a question that I will forward to our certification folks, and I'm not exactly sure what the question is. If you could talk about it a little bit more.
Okay. The DPP program is the only program that offers the student an option to work as a DPP while they're taking those DPP courses outside of the option 6. So if we don't have option 6 for administrative program, but we have a student that's enrolled in that particular alt cert, I guess, sort of option for DPP only. And when I flipped through this regulation just now, I don't see that as still being an option. And it's okay. I mean, it's okay if it isn't. I just want to make sure it wasn't just an oversight.
The part copied from the DPP, that section, I think it's section 6 maybe, it's actually section 7 for the Director of Pupil Personnel. With all of that section was lifted directly from the DPP regulation. Nothing was changed in it, Teresa. The only things that differed were sections 1, which are the definitions, and that was section 1 there. Section 2, which talked about the prerequisites. Section 3, which is the assessment, and the clear definitions of section 4. But the rest of the DPP regulation is exactly as the DPP regulation read previously.
Okay. I see where it says application for a 1-year probationary with the CA40. I've just thought it was more detailed than that before.
No. That's directly what was listed before. Nothing has changed in that. That's the same for all of the other programs. All the sections are identical to what were in their regulations previously, with the exception of the first 4 sections, which go across the board to all of those advanced educational leadership programs.
Okay.
So, Kathy, I see that you're on, Kathy Fields. You want to give some district input, and I know David Young is on. Would you all like to talk about the regulation and the descriptions or anything about that regulation?
Can you guys hear me? This is David.
Yeah. Good, David. Thank you.
You're welcome. And Kathy, you feel free to jump in here. I know you guys have some really specific district experiences as well. We would be in favor of some flexibility for teachers who don't have their rank 2 yet to be able to go ahead and pursue their rank 2 and potentially get their principalship that way. And I guess maybe we have a unique perspective. We've been doing a Grow Your Own partnership. It used to be with Eastern Kentucky, and now it's with Campbellsville. We were actually doing that back when you could get your principal's certification, your instructional leadership as a master's. And it was largely a positive for us. Even when some of those teachers chose not to pursue becoming a principal, a lot of times they just became better teachers because they had a broader view of the leadership aspect. They sometimes became better leaders inside their schools as teacher leaders. And then the other perspective I guess we have now is, now that earning a rank 2 is not a requirement, you know, I know when we started our Grow Your Own group this year, you know, we had some teachers who would have been part of that group or would have liked to have been part of that group, but couldn't because they didn't have their master's yet. So I think sometimes I think moving forward, we'll have teachers that it would benefit them to have that flexibility, and it wouldn't, in our eyes, it wouldn't be advancing them on at too quick a pace, or you know, whatever some of the other negatives would be. We think the negatives would probably outweigh the positives.
Thank you, David. So, in other words, you're saying that possibly giving flexibility not just to the principal program regarding the rank 2, but to all of the programs. Is that?
Yeah. Well, my particular experience has been with the principalship program.
Right.
So I guess I would have to think more about, you know, the other types of positions, but just off the top of my head, I think I would be in support of that across the board, but I certainly would be in support of it for the principalship program.
Right, and the draft regulation as it currently reads, David, specifically allows the principal programs to have that flexibility.
Okay.
It did not at this time give them to the DPP programs and the instructional supervisors and directors of special ed, but it did give it to the principal programs. So.
Yeah, it just seems like with things changing, so that the master's or the rank 2 isn't a requirement anymore, it just seems like that could, giving a little bit more flexibility for all those programs might be a needed adjustment.
Okay. So noted. Thank you. Very good. Kathy, did you want to weigh in on this?
Absolutely, Eve. I am actually representing Gary Cox with AIKCU now, having retired from Jessamine County Schools last year. I'm certainly interested in the whole possibility of opportunities for districts to work with colleges and universities on these preparation programs, as David said, in light of the fact that the master's is no longer required. So that's my take for my participation today, is to learn a little bit more so that I can assist the colleges and universities as well as the districts in partnerships.
Okay, and Kathy, since I have Gary on our UPPI stakeholder group, I'll add you.
Perfect, thank you.
And then that way you will receive all the information that he receives.
Perfect, thank you, Eve.
Sure. We want all, we desire to have all people providing input into the anything that impacts districts and P21 in Kentucky. We want to have as many participants providing input as possible. Do we have others that would like to weigh in at this time? We certainly want to use this as an open mic.
Hey, Eve, this is Gary Houchins at WKU. I wanted to ask a question about the superintendent component of the regulation.
Uh-huh.
I see here that we have a portfolio requirement for admission to the program.
Yes.
Is that under current reg as well?
Yes.
Okay.
That was lifted totally from the current reg, Gary. When the superintendents reviewed this a year ago, it was their recommendation. The current reg also had a lot of specific requirements for courses, you know, topics, and they asked that be taken out because they felt like that the programs and the people working together could determine those topics because they're changing kind of topics. But they did leave the portfolio as it currently is. They did not address taking that out.
Okay, very good.
And I believe a part of that was discussed as that is a measurement tool for a lot of the universities. They use that portfolio as their evaluation tool. But it was not, when they reviewed the reg, they didn't mention taking it out. But that is something we did ask the superintendents on giving feedback thus far have not mentioned taking that out.
Right. So we have a capstone project in the program now, and that's what I understood to be in the current regulation. But under what we're looking at, it looks like that's actually an admissions requirement, unless I'm misreading this.
I'll check that, Gary. It shouldn't be an admissions requirement, but I'll check and make sure, because I do know that yeah, when the regular draft was put together, everything that was in the current regulation was just lifted with the exception of the admission pieces, and anything that was different that needed to be there. But I'll ask her about that, because we certainly don't mean to add to something. We are basically trying to give more flexibility to the programs working with their districts, so that their evaluation tools would be reflective of what they need it to be. And the evaluation tools obviously are going to have to reflect the PECL standards, and that's what we're now taking and breaking down and deconstructing, so that we can say what would an advanced candidate, educational leadership candidate, an effective one look like, or an ineffective one. But I'm going to ask Cassie, I'm going to make note of that and ask her about that superintendent piece.
That would be great. It's in section 5 is the section on the school superintendent, and under subsection 2, part B, it's got an admissions portfolio. So this is all built in around the application process. So I do think that may be a change in practice that we need to take a look at there.
Okay, I'll look, because if that indeed was changed, it wasn't intended to be changed. So I'll ask her about that. Okay.
Okay, that'd be great. It would particularly have implications for option 6 superintendents, who are trying to get on the job quickly. So that's worth thinking about.
Right, and to my knowledge, we have some option 6 candidates currently under this regulation, so it shouldn't be changing that criteria. So I will ask, or we'll try to make it clear. I think what it references is that the portfolio is usually like a letter from the district and references and things, but I'll check that to make sure.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Eve?
Yes.
It's Teresa Wallace again. Actually, that is in the current regulation, and I only know that because I was on the committee that helped write that several years ago.
We didn't add anything to any of these pieces, so evidently that is current practice, and it was not through the feedback we've received thus far to change that. But I will send a note to Tom Shelton and have him work with the superintendents and ask about that. Other discussion pieces?
Eve, this is Robert Lyons at Murray State.
Yes, Robert. Hi, how are you?
I'm doing well. Just a quick, I guess this is a process question. We really don't have a strong either position one way or the other on the masters at this moment. I mean, there's certainly merits both sides have been presented, and I think things will have to just play themselves out. I think we just want to make sure we would want everybody to be, I guess, make sure there's one set of rules in the state would probably be our concerns, just to make sure it looks like the regulation as written allows for the waiver basically, but is there a reality where we could end up with 2 sets of rules just depending on the decisions of the board? I mean, I guess that's what we're trying to figure out on this end, just the process to see that all of this are under the same findings. If it's no masters, then we'll roll with it. If it is, then we all have the same set of rules. That's kind of what we're looking for.
Well, I can't pretend to speak for the board. They did receive the first reading in October, and the recommendation, of course, they had received last December the PECL recommendations, and of course adopted those in February. They also received an update in June where we talked about the recommendations and where the committee was coming from and things. And so they had already received all that information. What they saw in October were all those recommendations put into place in the draft regulation and what it would look like. The only thing that was added in that did not come as a recommendation from the stakeholder committee was the flexibility option that was placed in the principal program, and that came about as a discussion outside the UPPI group, but in with other board members, and when I say board, the commissioner and the Board of Education. And some of our EPSB board have had some calls, and they've talked about this, and there is a desire for the flexibility. Now, I think what you might be asking, Robert, is would there be any additions to that? And you realize that once a regulation is passed, then it would be up to the standards board working with the committee and the participants and the stakeholders to do any kind of implementation kinds of pieces that would be necessary. So whether there are additional, I don't think there's going to be different rules for people, but I do think that flexibility may be there. And I'm not sure if that's what the issue is whether some people play by some admission criteria and others play by others. I think the only criteria piece that's being challenged is the rank 2. So what the flexibility would be, you would be allowed as a preparation program to admit people into the principal preparation program if they did not have a rank 2 but met the other requirements that your program requires of candidates into the program. And that's the only and everyone would obviously have processes in place in which they would address that. Does that help, Robert? Is that what you're asking?
You know, Eve, I tell you what I did. When I got done talking, instead of hitting mute, I hit end. We've been scrambling trying to get back on this call till just this moment in time. So I will review what you said on the recording. I'm so sorry.
Okay, well, basically, in summary, Robert, all I was basically saying is that the only thing that flexibility clause does at this time is gives all of the preparation programs an opportunity to allow folks into the principal program if they do not currently have a rank 2, as long as they meet other criteria, and that's the flexibility piece. You were asking if there were going to be additional rules. The only thing that sometimes occurs is once a regulation is passed, sometimes implementation guidelines come from EPSB, but again, those implementation guidelines are usually in working with stakeholder groups. But those, again, would only be guidelines. They would not be regulation.
So, I mean, with the flexibility clause in there, does that meet the felt need at Western? I mean, I'm just curious. It seems like we're kind of addressing it one way or the other. I don't know. I mean, maybe it doesn't. I'm curious.
Yeah, you know, Gary, you chime in when you think you need to. But from our standpoint, I agree with you on one issue that I think we all need to be playing with the same set of rules. And my concern is, I think the concern of our faculty is that we either have a rank 2 requirement or we don't, and to waive it for some and it begins to be a slippery slope. So either we're all going to be, you know, admitting people and awarding a master's or in principal prep if we need to or not. I think that's what the real issue is whether we're all playing the same game, because the last conversation that I participated in at EPSB, there was a concern that some programs were going to just make their program a master's programs, while others were going to continue to be a postmaster's EDS or postmaster's certificate, and then there becomes this unhealthy competition among the IHEs, and people say, well, I'm going to go to Western because they allow you to get a master's, where I'm not going to go to Murray because it's a postmaster's thing. So while I appreciate, and I think the intent is good in terms of what the current reg is saying and giving that flexibility, I hate to think that we're going to do it on a student by student basis. I would prefer to see us look at this holistically, and if we want to have a master's program in principal prep, then we should be able to do that. The way I read the reg is it's a per student kind of situation, and I'm not comfortable with that, and I don't know that our faculty are either. But Gary, if I have not articulated this well.
Well, from my perspective, I'm actually perfectly comfortable with the language of the regulation as it's written in here right now. I think the level playing field is that we're all admitting candidates who have teacher certification and at least 3 years worth of teaching experience, and meet whatever other program criteria we establish, and those are the rules. And I'm comfortable with that, and I think each program can make judgments accordingly. We already have provisions in place where if we feel as though someone hasn't demonstrated the competencies, the minimum competencies and dispositions that we would want out of a principal candidate, we have a mechanism for not admitting them to the program already. And I don't see anything whatsoever wrong with the universities being able to offer a multitude of options to the principalship. I think what we would do here at WKU is we would have a master's degree pathway, we would have a rank 1 pathway, and we would have a certification only pathway, and those would be offered to students based on what their individual needs are, and every other university would have that option available to them as well. So I would be in full favor of the regulation as it's currently written, because it gives maximum flexibility to the institutions, which is what we want.
Okay, I was just asking so I would understand. I mean, I'm not in opposition for what you just said, and I have the same concerns about it's a little, it can help set up unhealthy competition maybe if it's interpreted, some are masters and some are not. So, I mean, really there's a waiver and then there's the regulation. I'm just trying to see how those two things fit together. If you're comfortable with the regulation, are we looking for a waiver, or is really the conversation about changing the regulation to not have to actually just not require the masters at all? Is that really the conversation we're having here?
Well, I just want to correct a piece of language on that. The regulation does not require the master's. It requires a rank 2, and there is a difference in that. Rank 2 can be obtained in ways other than a master's degree. It could be like a 5th-year program, and I do know that some of our universities do offer persons opportunities to collect credits toward like a 5th-year program. So the language is just a little bit different for that reason, and that was at the request of the stakeholder group, because they indicated that they had some folks apply to the program, but they didn't have a master's degree, but they did have the equivalency for a rank 2, and that's why that language is in there. Many of us associate rank 2 as a master's because I guess the propensity, or the majority of our programs at the universities, the rank 2 programs are typically master's programs, but there are other ways to obtain a rank 2. So I just wanted to clarify that language just a little bit so that we did understand that the UPPI group was not going with a master's degree requirement. They were going with a rank 2 requirement.
Yeah, and in turn, just to follow up there too, then I think the reason that, and I understand the question that Robert's raising, and I think that Margie's trying to address, is that do we require the rank 2 or do we not? Why put it on here and then have a waiver for it But as I'm reading this, I think what the regulation overall is saying is that a rank 2 is generally required for all of these advanced education leadership certifications. But in the case of the school principalship, programs may waive that requirement at their discretion. And so it's just as it applies to the principalship that waiver subsection is written in here, if I'm understanding the intent.
That's correct, Gary. That's the way it currently reads, is that the rank 2 requirement is across all 5 of the advanced educational leadership programs. Then a waiver is given to the principal programs to say, if they don't have that, you can still admit them if they meet your other requirements.
So is it then the position, Eve, and I need to be able to conceptualize this. If we were to develop our program and have those 3 pathways that Gary articulated, the rank, the certificate, and the MA, that EPSB would approve all 3 pathways.
Oh, sure. That's the way we kind of operate now. Actually, this regulation allows you to do that without a lot more. I guess, you look at your programs and that would be your criteria. And when you describe the programs, you simply talk about what the admission criteria for each of those programs or those options would be. Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful.
Yeah, this is intended, as I understand it, and I'm simply the facilitator here, as I understand it, this is simply to allow folks to enter preparation programs for principals with a little bit, with the option that a teacher who has not completed a master's or a rank 2, but they are certainly a good candidate, that the preparation program could look at that candidate as long as they're meeting the other criteria. Other comments or discussion? This is good conversation today. Good clarification.
Hey, Eve.
Yes.
It's Will Wells. I was just curious if part of the reason for removing the master's criteria or making it optional to address teacher or principal shortages in certain parts of the state. Is that part of the motivation?
Well, what we can do is, if you want to go ahead and give them it will have a number on it if they want something. Okay. And then we'll forward out the one that's been updated. And we'll go and give it to them. All right. I'm so sorry.
Okay, so that one. Will, in order to answer your question,
nobody did. I mean,
yes, I think you're right on target. That the board waived the requirement for teachers to have a master's degree. We know that there are people out there already with master's degree and rank 2s and things like that that will come into our programs. I think this is just allowing flexibility because it could be that teachers have pursued a pathway other than the master's degree now that they can, and allow that to be considered so that you may not have a rank 2. They may have taken some additional kinds of courses or credentials that really enhance their ability to enter the programs. And I think that's what this regulation is attempting to do, is to let each program look at the candidates that they admit and decide bringing them into the program. The exit criteria is going to be pretty much the same for everyone in that you have to demonstrate that your candidates through your program have met the PESEL standards and whatever criteria and evaluations that you want. Does that help, Will?
I teach both in our programs for students who are getting their master's degree, as well as getting certification. And
I'm sorry, Will, I can barely hear you. Can you speak a little bit louder?
Yes, having teachers, there's a lot of distortion. I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. Owens, I'm not sure that you have your speaker on mute. There you go. Okay, now Will.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. I guess my experience teaching in our master's program, as well as our principal certification, program and our superintendent certification program. There's just a pretty large discrepancy between students in the master's program and those who already have a master's degree and are earning their principal certification. And that would be my concern, is that we lower the bar unnecessarily unless the motivation is to reduce principal shortages. And I could see that as being the benefit of doing something like this. But if there's not a driving need like that, then I guess that would be our concern, is that we are lowering the bar some on the candidates that would be in a principal certification program.
Correct. Well, the way the regulation reads is the rank 2 would still be a piece of the requirement unless you have a candidate that through the process you demonstrated meets all of the other pre-entrance requirements to the principal program, and then the EPPs would have an option to waive that rank 2 requirement at that time. The group did discuss the benefits of candidates coming in with advanced coursework through a master's program. I think the whole discussion of the value of a master's, I think many of these programs valued that, but I do think that consideration is being given now to the fact that the board has gone the other direction and indicated that teachers and districts should really be concerned about how they're improving their own professional growth, and it may not translate into a master's degree. There are shortages in some areas, and it's not that there aren't enough principal certified people in Kentucky. It's just it would be contextual. It would be in the specific area. We do have options for people to work as a principal as well as participate in a program at that time. That would be another way that a person could gain entrance in consideration. So I think there are just lots of things to consider. I think that the purpose of the regulation as it's drafted is to allow the university preparation programs to work with their districts in ways to meet the needs of those districts, so that the principal preparation programs are indeed serving the needs of the districts in Kentucky.
Okay, yeah, thank you for that explanation. That helps. Do you foresee the if a university program wants to establish a waiver, do you see that being regulated or monitored in any way, or is it just going to be up to the university without any type of regulation from the state level?
At this point, Will, I think the regulation, if it is adopted by the board, would go into effect on the timeline once it works through the regulatory process. I think the waiver issues, certainly we will continue to monitor programs, but the way that the Standards Board monitors programs is through the exit criteria. And do you have candidates who are being employed and serving in principal positions and making an impact on student achievement and an impact on teacher growth and things like that. So it will be the criteria that the university prep programs provide on the quality of their candidates. So that's how we pretty much monitor the programs. We do that now currently. So will there be another looking at the candidates that are waived versus the candidates or not? At this time, I don't know of any intent to do that, but certainly we will be looking at the candidates that exit any program.
Okay, thank you. And the other thing that we noticed in reviewing the reg was the large amount of requirements for principal entry into a principal program compared to the other advanced certifications. I mean, there's like more than 2 pages of requirements for that one, and that's considerably more than the others, and we just wondered why that was, and could any of those be considered?
Those requirements for the principal program as identified in Section 9 were simply lifted from the past regulation. Basically it just kind of it just talks about what the written statement is and things like that. It's guiding that. There was not a suggestion during the review of the regulation to change those descriptors or in terms of admission. That was just simply in the last regulation that people reviewed. So certainly, I guess everyone was in agreement with it because no one suggested it being taken out, Will.
Okay.
That was in the previous regulation, and if you recall, that regulation went through, gosh, I think it took 2 to 3 years of developing when they did that. So the specificity that's in it simply came from the regulation as it currently was.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Eve, this is David Young again.
Uh-huh.
So am I correct? I haven't been able to look at the regulation. I don't think I received it if you guys emailed it out. Am I understanding correctly that the flexibility is already built in for the principalship program, but there isn't flexibility built in for the more advanced programs in the reg at the moment?
That's currently true, yes.
Okay.
Section 1, which gives the definitions, in Section 2, which talks about what are the definitions of advanced leadership, and then Section 2 talks about what the admission criteria would be for all the programs across the board, and that does have rank 2 in it. And then the only exception to that in terms of waiver or flexibility has been given to the principal program, and it's written in that subsection of this regulation. It is not written as a waiver for the other programs.
Okay. Well, so just for what it's worth from a school district perspective, I've had more time to think about it as I've listened to everybody. I think I would be more hesitant on giving that flexibility for some of the more advanced certifications, DPP, superintendent, whatever the case may be. But, of course, I still am in support of it, giving the flexibility as it's written now for the principalship program. Okay.
Thank you. That's good input. And I think that's the input that we basically have received thus far, is that those other programs are pretty much district-wide programs, whereas the principal program is focused on a school. And there are people that possibly could enter into the principal preparation without the rank 2 requirement if the university or the preparation program so desired. So yes, you're correct. That is across the board for the other advanced leadership positions with the waiver for the principal. Other comments? I noticed that we do have other universities on board. Anything from Eastern or from U of L? Or Spalding? Or Northern?
I don't have any additional comments. I think we talked about it at the meeting a couple of weeks ago, and then online with Western originally. So no, I mean I'm okay with moving forward.
Okay, thank you, Ann. Anything from Northern or from U of L?
No, this is Northern. Rosa Weaver and I are here. I think we're okay.
Okay, good. Thank you. Hi to both of you. Anything from Spalding? Teresa, anything else that you wish to add? Well, is there, I really want to leave this as an open mic for anyone to comment or make any statements that they wish to. I do wish to share with you that the board will be discussing this document, this regulation, on December the 10th at the board meeting. It will be the second reading. The comments that have been taken, there will be some cleanup of language, but not necessarily change in the document. I think so that it is clear. That's the kind of the feedback we've received for implementation purposes. There is going to be a statement with the requirement for the assessment in Section 3 that the intent of this is that if you have taken the school leadership licensure assessment in one program, that you would not be necessarily required to take it again because it's simply a measure of the PESEL standards, and that's going to be just added in terms of clarity sake, which was a recommendation of the committee of the UPPI stakeholders, that people not be required to keep taking that test over and over again if they had a principal certificate and they went to an instructional supervisor program or a DOS program or any other program, that they would have to take the assessment again. And so that would be a clarifying statement. Other than that, any additional comments about the regulation?
Eve, thank you for hosting this and for providing the opportunity for everyone to voice their opinion and ask questions. I think it was a great conversation and provided a lot of clarity.
And we certainly always want to do that. So thank you for making the request, and thanks to everyone for participating, and particularly for sharing your perspectives as well as asking for clarifications. I think it always helps each of us when someone asks for clarification of something. And I will check, I have made notes to check on the superintendent piece. And we do know that's in the current regulation, but I will call that to Cassie's attention. And this has been recorded so that we will make it available to anyone that wishes to review it again, because we certainly want to keep this open. We want the discussion to be there, and we want this regulation to meet the needs of the university programs, the preparation programs, as well as the school districts, and that's what we're trying to keep in mind. And the desire of, as I understand it, and I'm simply conveying this to you, the desire of the administration is to work with everyone such that where there is needed flexibility, that it's offered. And so that was the intent of making some changes to this regulation as well. So anything else for the good of the order? Robin, if you are still on, is there anything that you wish to add? Okay, there you go. Okay.
Eve, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Okay. The only thing I wanted to add was thanks again for all the good conversation today. Lots of good feedback and ideas, and just appreciate the participation.
Great. Very good. If you have if after we leave the conversation, you have anything that arises that you wish, and David, I will make sure that you get a copy of the regulation, then certainly we will receive those from you. Feel free to send them to us. We certainly want to allow anyone for input into this process. But I do want to wish each of you a good afternoon. I will tell you that in Florida, they consider this a cold wave. It's 60 today, and there's some wind, and they're saying it's cold. So for those of you in
Poor
Kentucky,
baby. Poor baby.
It's sunshiny outside and 60, but there's some wind in there. And believe it or not, they're wearing fur coats down here. So, but I'll be back with you shortly in Kentucky. And again, we do have a UPPI stakeholder meeting on December the 6th. We would invite, it's at the EPSB board meeting, the conference room A. On 100 Airport Road. We would invite any of you to participate in that you wish to. And we will be sending out an RSVP shortly on that. Thanks to all. We're going to go ahead and end this now.